What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected gentlemen reaches his breaking point on live television? Tonight, we're diving into the shocking moment that left audiences speechless and industry insiders questioning everything they thought they knew about Pierce Brosnan. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly respect can turn to confrontation when boundaries are crossed. Make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because what you're about to witness will have you picking sides. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual energy as Jimmy Fallon prepared to welcome Pierce Brosnan, the legendary actor known for his suave portrayal of James Bond and his reputation as one of the most gracious guests in Hollywood. The audience was primed for the typical Fallon experience. Lighthearted banter, maybe a game, definitely some laughs. Nobody expected what was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Pierce Brosnan," Jimmy announced with his signature enthusiasm. The crowd erupted as Brosnan walked onto the stage, his trademark smile in place, waving to the audience with that familiar charm that had made him a household name for decades. Pierce," Jimmy began as they settled into their chairs. "Great to have you back on the show, buddy. You look fantastic as always." "Thank you, Jimmy. Always a pleasure," Brosnan replied, his Irish accent adding warmth to his words. "The audience here is wonderful. Such energy." Jimmy leaned forward with that mischievous glint in his eye that regular viewers knew meant he was about to dive into something potentially embarrassing. "So, Pierce, I have to ask, and I know the audience is dying to know too. There have been some pretty wild rumors floating around about your personal life lately. Care to set the record straight?" The smile on Brosnan's face flickered for just a moment, barely perceptible to most, but the cameras got it. "I'm not sure what rumors you're referring to, Jimmy. Perhaps we could talk about the new film instead." "Oh, come on, Pierce," Jimmy pressed on, his tone still playful, but with an edge that wasn't quite as friendly as before. "You know what I'm talking about. The tabloids have been having a field day. Your marriage, the alleged affairs, the whole situation with that co-star from your last project. The people want to know the truth." The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Even the usually boisterous audience seemed to sense that something had shifted. Brosnan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his hands clasping together in his lap in a way that suggested he was working very hard to maintain his composure. "Jimmy," Brosnan said slowly, his voice maintaining its pleasant tone, but with a steel underneath that hadn't been there moments before. "I came here tonight to discuss my work, to connect with the fans who support what I do professionally. My personal life, my marriage, these are private matters that I don't believe belong on a talk show." Jimmy, seemingly oblivious to the warning signs or perhaps choosing to ignore them, pushed forward. "But Pierce, you're a public figure. Your fans deserve to know who you really are, don't they? I mean, the whole James Bond thing was built on this image of the perfect gentleman, the loyal lover. And now, these stories are painting a very different picture." The camera zoomed in on Brosnan's face, capturing the moment when diplomacy began to crack. His eyes, usually warm and inviting, had gone cold. The practiced smile that had charmed audiences for decades was nowhere to be found. "My fans," Brosnan said, his voice dropping to a lower register, "deserve entertainment, quality storytelling, and professional performances. They don't deserve to have their evening entertainment turned into a gossip session about unsubstantiated tabloid nonsense." "Unsubstantiated?" Jimmy laughed, but it wasn't his usual infectious laugh. There was something forced about it, something that suggested he knew he was walking into dangerous territory, but couldn't help himself. "Come on, Pierce. These aren't just random tabloid stories. There are photos, witnesses, people are talking." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The usual energy that made The Tonight Show such a beloved program had been replaced by something much more uncomfortable. Something that felt more like watching a car accident in slow motion than enjoying late-night entertainment. "Jimmy," Brosnan said, his voice now carrying a warning that only someone completely tone-deaf could miss. "I'm going to say this once, and I hope you'll have the professional courtesy to respect it. My marriage is not up for discussion. The tabloid photographs you're referring to have been taken out of context, and the witnesses you mention are people looking for their 15 minutes of fame at the expense of my family's privacy." But Jimmy, perhaps caught up in what he thought was just playful celebrity roasting, or maybe driven by producers in his ear pushing for ratings gold, didn't back down. Instead, he leaned in closer, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone that made it clear he thought he was about to deliver the knockout punch. "But Pierce, what about the hotel room in Prague? What about the late-night dinners that went way past professional? What about the fact that your wife hasn't been seen with you at any public? The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Pierce Brosnan's entire demeanor changed in that instant, transforming from the polished gentleman everyone knew into something far more formidable. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop 10 degrees as his piercing blue eyes locked onto Jimmy's with an intensity that could have cut glass. "Stop," Brosnan said, his voice no longer carrying even a pretense of friendliness. It was a command, sharp and final, delivered with the kind of authority that made it clear this was not a request. "Stop right there, Jimmy." Jimmy, finally seeming to realize he might have pushed too far, tried to backpedal with nervous laughter. "Hey, Pierce, I'm just having some fun here. You know how it is. The audience loves this stuff. It's all in good fun." "Good fun," Brosnan repeated, his accent growing thicker as his composure began to crack completely. "You think destroying a man's reputation, attacking his marriage, spreading lies and innuendo on national television is good fun? You think my children watching their father being humiliated is entertainment?" The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the usually chatty audience seemed to be holding their collective breath. Jimmy's signature smile had completely vanished, replaced by the dawning realization that he was no longer in control of this interview. "Pierce, listen. Maybe I came on a little strong there, but you have to understand this is what people are talking about. I'm just giving you a chance to set the record straight," Jimmy said, his voice now carrying a defensive edge that suggested he knew he was in trouble, but wasn't quite ready to admit it. Brosnan leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a level that was somehow more menacing than if he had shouted. "Set the record straight. The record doesn't need to be set straight, because there is no record to set straight. What you're doing is perpetuating gossip, spreading rumors, and using your platform to damage people's lives for the sake of ratings. But Pierce, come on. You're a big boy. You can handle a few questions. This is what celebrities deal with." "It comes with the territory," Jimmy replied, his tone becoming increasingly dismissive in a way that showed he still didn't grasp the gravity of what was happening. That dismissive tone was the final straw. Brosnan's eyes flashed with something that looked almost dangerous. "Comes with the territory. Let me tell you what comes with the territory, Jimmy. Respect comes with the territory. Professional courtesy comes with the territory. Basic human decency comes with the territory. Pierce, you're being a little dramatic here, don't you think?" Jimmy said, attempting to regain control of the situation with a laugh that sounded forced and hollow. "I mean, we're all friends here, friends." Brosnan's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his controlled facade. "Friends don't ambush each other on live television. Friends don't use their position to attack someone's family. Friends don't spread malicious gossip disguised as entertainment." The camera caught Jimmy glancing nervously toward his producers offstage, clearly looking for guidance on how to handle a situation that had spiraled far beyond anything in his experience. The usual Tonight Show playbook didn't have a chapter on what to do when a guest completely turned on the host. "Look, Pierce, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we just move on to something else? Tell us about your new movie," Jimmy suggested, his voice now carrying a note of desperation that suggested he was finally understanding the hole he had dug for himself. But Brosnan was far from finished. "Move on. You think you can just casually destroy someone's reputation and then move on to promoting a film? You think you can attack my marriage, question my integrity, and then just change the subject like nothing happened?" "I wasn't attacking anything, Pierre. I was just asking questions that people want answered," Jimmy protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he seemed to realize how weak that defense sounded. "Questions that people want answered," Brosnan repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "Or questions that your producers think will generate controversy and drive up ratings. There's a difference, Jimmy, and I think we both know which category tonight falls into." The accusation hit home. Jimmy's face flushed red, and for the first time since the interview began, he seemed genuinely angry rather than just pushy. "Now wait just a minute, Pierce. You don't get to come on my show and then attack how I do my job. I've been doing this for years and I know what my audience wants." "Your audience wants to be entertained, not to witness character assassination," Brosnan shot back. "Your audience deserves better than watching you use your platform to spread gossip and innuendo about people's private lives. Character assassination. That's a little much, don't you think?" Jimmy's voice was rising now, his own composure beginning to slip as the confrontation escalated beyond anything either of them had anticipated. Brosnan stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence of the studio. The simple act of standing transformed the entire dynamic of the interview, making it clear that this was no longer a conversation between host and guest, but something much larger. Standing over Jimmy, Pierce Brosnan had transformed from the charming guest into something far more imposing. The cameras captured every nuance of his face, the disappointment mixing with barely contained fury as he looked down at the host who had pushed him beyond his breaking point. "You want to know what's really disappointing, Jimmy?" Brosnan continued, his voice steady, but carrying an undercurrent of steel that made everyone in the studio sit up and take notice. "I've done this show multiple times over the years. I've always enjoyed our conversations, always felt there was mutual respect. But tonight, you've shown me that none of that meant anything to you." Jimmy, still seated and now looking distinctly uncomfortable with Brosnan towering over him, tried to regain some semblance of control. "Pierce, please sit down. Let's talk about this like adults. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Brosnan's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "You spend 15 minutes trying to destroy my reputation on live television, and I'm the one making a scene?" The audacity of that statement is truly remarkable. The audience was completely silent now, watching what felt more like a dramatic confrontation in a theater than a late-night talk show interview. Some were pulling out their phones, clearly recognizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Look, Pierce, I think you're overreacting here. This is television. This is entertainment. People expect a certain level of, excitement, controversy. It's not personal," Jimmy said, his voice taking on a pleading quality that suggested he was desperately trying to salvage the situation. "Not personal?" Brosnan repeated, his voice rising for the first time since the confrontation began. "You attacked my marriage, questioned my fidelity, suggested I'm a cheater and a liar, and you tell me it's not personal? What exactly would you consider personal, Jimmy?" Jimmy stood up as well, perhaps feeling too vulnerable sitting while Brosnan loomed over him. But the move only seemed to escalate the tension further. Now, both men were standing, facing off in what looked more like a confrontation between adversaries than a chat between host and guest. "I never called you a cheater or a liar," Jimmy protested. "I asked questions based on stories that are already out there." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Brosnan shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're hiding behind semantics. You didn't have to call me anything directly. Jimmy, you did something much more insidious. You planted seeds, asked leading questions, made insinuations, and let the audience draw their own conclusions." Jimmy's face was getting redder by the minute, and his usual composure was completely gone. "You know what, Pierce? Maybe you're right. Maybe I did push a little hard, but you don't get to come on my show and then lecture me about how to do my job. I've built this show into what it is today, and I don't need career advice from someone who's been playing the same character for decades." The insult hung in the air like a slap. The audience actually gasped audibly at Jimmy's words, recognizing that he had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Even the camera operators seemed stunned by the sudden viciousness of the host's attack. Brosnan's expression changed completely. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something that looked almost like pity. When he spoke, his voice was quietly devastating. "The same character for decades," he said slowly, each word deliberate and cutting. "James Bond made me a household name, yes, but I've spent my career working in independent films, supporting new directors, championing causes I believe in. I've used the platform that character gave me to make a difference in the world. What have you done with yours, Jimmy?" Jimmy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He clearly hadn't expected Brosnan to turn the attack back on him so effectively. "You sit behind this desk every night," Brosnan continued, his voice gaining momentum. "And you have the opportunity to elevate people, to celebrate their achievements, to bring joy and positivity into people's homes. Instead, tonight you chose to use that platform to tear someone down for entertainment value. So tell me, Jimmy, who's really been playing the same character for decades." "Now you listen here," Jimmy began, his voice shaking with anger, but Brosnan cut him off with a gesture that was both dismissive and final. "No, you listen," Brosnan said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more authority than if he had shouted. "I came here tonight as your guest with respect for you and your show. I answered your questions about my work. I engaged with your audience. I tried to be the kind of guest that makes for good television. But instead of reciprocating that respect, you chose to ambush me." The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed loud. Everyone present seemed to understand they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. And the worst part, Jimmy, Brosnan continued, is that you did it with such casual cruelty. You weren't even passionate about it. You just threw around accusations and rumors like they were confetti at a parade, with no thought for the real human being sitting across from you, or the family who might be watching at home. Jimmy tried one more time to salvage something from the wreckage. Maybe we both said some things we shouldn't have. Why don't we just call it even and start over? Brosnan looked at him for a long moment, and when he spoke, the question hung in the air like a death sentence. Jimmy Fallon, the man who had built his career on being likable, on making people laugh, on creating moments of joy, stood there speechless as Pierce Brosnan's words cut through him like a blade. The studio lights seemed harsh now, exposing every uncomfortable truth that had been laid bare in the last few minutes. I don't have to listen to this, Jimmy finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. This is my show, Pierce. My show, my rules. You don't get to come in here and turn this into some kind of moral lecture. Brosnan smiled then, but it wasn't the warm, charming smile that had made him famous. It was cold, disappointed, and infinitely sad. Your show, your rules. Yes, I suppose that sums it up perfectly, doesn't it, Jimmy? And what a show you've created tonight. The audience was completely transfixed. Some covering their mouths in shock, others leaning forward, as if they were watching the climax of a thrilling drama. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what was clearly becoming television history. You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? Brosnan continued, his voice now carrying a weight that seemed to fill the entire studio. It's not that you attacked me. I'm a public figure. I can handle criticism. I can handle tough questions. I can even handle unfair treatment. The real tragedy is what this says about where we've gone as a culture. Jimmy tried to interrupt. Pierce, I think you're being a little melodramatic here. But Brosnan held up a hand that silenced him completely. When did we decide that destroying people's reputations was entertainment? Brosnan asked, his voice rising with genuine passion. When did we decide that the private pain of public figures was fair game for our amusement? When did we lose the basic human decency to treat each other with respect, even when there are cameras rolling and ratings at stake? The words seemed to hit Jimmy like physical blows. His face had gone from red to pale, and he looked like a man who was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. I never meant for it to go this far, Jimmy said quietly, his usual bravado completely gone. I just thought, a little controversy, get people talking. It's good for the show. Good for the show, Brosnan repeated, shaking his head in disgust. And there it is, Jimmy. The truth finally comes out. It was never about journalism. Never about giving me a chance to address rumors. Never about serving your audience. It was about ratings. It was about creating a moment that would go viral, regardless of who got hurt in the process. The studio was so quiet that every breath seemed amplified. The audience, the crew, everyone present seemed to understand they were witnessing something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. You want to know what's really sad, Jimmy? Brosnan continued, his voice growing softer, but somehow more powerful. I actually came here tonight excited to be on your show. I've always respected what you've built here. Always enjoyed our previous conversations. I thought tonight would be fun, a chance to connect with people who enjoy my work. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Jimmy's shoulders sagged as if he was finally feeling the full weight of what he had done. Pierce, I'm sorry. I really am. I got carried away. I made some bad choices tonight. Can we find a way to fix this? Brosnan looked at him for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with a finality that made it clear there would be no fixing this. Some things can't be fixed, Jimmy. Some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed. Some words once spoken can't be taken back. Tonight, you showed me who you really are when you think it will benefit you, and I'm showing you who I am when my integrity is attacked. With that, Brosnan began walking toward the edge of the stage. The cameras followed him, capturing every step of what was clearly going to be one of the most dramatic exits in talk show history. Pierce, wait, Jimmy called out, desperation clear in his voice. Don't do this. Don't walk out. We can work this out. Brosnan stopped and turned back, his expression containing a mixture of disappointment and resolve that was heartbreaking to witness. No, Jimmy. We can't work this out because this wasn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. This was a choice. You chose to prioritize ratings over respect, controversy over decency, entertainment over human dignity, and I'm choosing not to be part of it. But the interview, the show, what about the audience? Jimmy pleaded, gesturing toward the stunned crowd. The audience deserves better than this, Brosnan replied, his voice carrying across the silent studio like a bell. They deserve hosts who elevate rather than tear down, who celebrate rather than destroy, who understand that the people who come on these shows are human beings, not just content to be consumed. Jimmy made one last desperate attempt. Pierce, please don't make me look like the villain here. We're both professionals. We both made mistakes tonight. Brosnan paused at the edge of the stage, his hand on the curtain that would take him away from this nightmare. When he turned back one final time, his voice carried a sadness that seemed to encompass not just this moment, but something much larger about the state of celebrity culture and media. Jimmy, I'm not making you look like anything. You've done that all by yourself tonight. The only thing I'm doing is refusing to participate in my own destruction for the sake of your entertainment. And with that, Pierce Brosnan walked off the Tonight Show stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a devastated host, and a moment that would be dissected and debated for years to come. The cameras captured Jimmy standing alone on the stage, the weight of what had just happened written across his face as the reality of the situation finally sank in. The episode ended not with laughter or applause, but with silence and the unmistakable sense that something fundamental had shifted. In the world of late-night television, what did you think of this confrontation? Was Pierce Brosnan justified in his dramatic exit? Or did Jimmy Fallon have a right to ask tough questions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible celebrity moments that you won't see anywhere else.